The past is littered with civilizations that fell not to enemies alone, but to their own stubborn devotion to ritual and tradition. From human sacrifices to rigid social codes, some societies clung so fiercely to the old ways that they ignored the warning signs of reality. And when they finally faced consequences, it was too late. Today, on Top 10 Untold, we'll uncover 10 civilizations that trusted tradition more than reality, revealing chilling lessons that echo even in our modern world. Before we step into the shadows of history, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss the hidden truths we reveal about humanity's darkest decisions. Warning: 10 Aztec ritual calendar versus Spanish tactics, approximately 600 words. In 1519, the Aztec Empire stood as a marvel of Central American civilization. Cities like Tenochtitlan were sprawling metropolises, with towering temples and bustling marketplaces. The Aztec elite meticulously followed a ritual calendar that dictated every aspect of life, from planting and harvesting to war and tribute. Every battle, every festival, every offering to the gods was carefully timed. But when Hernán Cortés and his small band of Spanish conquistadors arrived, this devotion to ritual became a fatal flaw. The Aztecs delayed a decisive confrontation because their prophecies dictated certain days for war. Cortés, cunningly, exploited this. He formed alliances with the Tlaxcalans and other tribes subjugated by the Aztecs, using their discontent to weaken the empire from within. When the final battles came, Aztec warriors, trained to follow the calendar, found themselves outmaneuvered and unprepared. Their gods had been trusted to protect them, but faith alone could not withstand cannons, steel swords, and disease. Lesson: blind adherence to ritual can leave even the most powerful societies vulnerable. Present parallel. Today, businesses or governments that cling to outdated protocols may fail to adapt to technological or geopolitical shifts. For instance, companies ignoring AI automation or supply chain disruptions risk collapse. Future warning question: could humanity's obsession with ceremonial or procedural tradition, political rituals, bureaucracy, or religious formalities, blind us to imminent crises? Could we fail to act in time against climate, pandemics, or geopolitical threats? Warning: 9 Maya bloodletting during crop collapse, approximately 580 words. Long before the Spanish arrived, the Maya civilization dominated vast regions of Mesoamerica. Their cities were architectural marvels, and their knowledge of astronomy rivaled anything in the Old World. Yet, during prolonged droughts, the Maya faced crop failures that threatened mass starvation. Instead of innovating agriculture or developing new irrigation techniques, Maya rulers doubled down on bloodletting rituals. Priests demanded sacrifices to appease gods, believing the gods controlled rainfall and harvests. Kings pierced their tongues and genitals, and nobles shed blood, sometimes executing prisoners, all in the hope of divine intervention. Entire cities, Copan, Tikal, Palenque, saw populations decline as famine gripped the land. Despite mounting evidence, tradition ruled. Crops failed, people starved, society fractured. Lesson: When spiritual dogma outweighs practical survival, collapse is inevitable. Present parallel. In some regions today, governments or organizations ignore environmental warnings or economic data in favor of ideology or ritualized policy. Denial of climate science or rigid adherence to unsustainable practices mirrors the Maya's fatal stubbornness. Future warning question: if society today refuses to change harmful patterns, could humanity face a collapse not caused by enemies, but by its own refusal to adapt? Warning 8 Druids. Opposing Roman engineering, approximately 590 words. Across Iron Age Europe, Celtic tribes flourished under the guidance of Druids, the spiritual and political elite. Druids were the guardians of knowledge, history, and law, preserving sacred rituals and oral traditions. When the Romans began expanding northward, they brought roads, aqueducts, and military innovations. Yet the Druids resisted, seeing Roman engineering as a threat to their culture and sacred lands. Bridges, fortifications, and roads could have strengthened tribal defenses or improved trade, but the Druids forbade their construction in sacred zones. Villages and towns continued to rely on outdated fortifications and local bridges. When Roman legions advanced, Celtic armies were uncoordinated, infrastructure was insufficient, and trade networks lagged behind. Resistance without adaptation left them vulnerable. Rome conquered or subdued many tribes, absorbing their lands and erasing much of their culture. Lesson: preserving identity is vital, but resisting practical innovations can be fatal. Present parallel. Today, communities or governments that reject modernization or technology risk falling behind economically and militarily. From education systems ignoring digital tools to industries refusing to adopt automation, history repeats itself. Future warning question: could extreme cultural rigidity prevent modern societies from adapting to global threats, cyber warfare, pandemics, or economic collapse? Warning 7 Japanese samurai rejecting firearms initially, approximately 600 words. During Japan's Sengoku period, samurai warriors adhered to the Bushido Code, valuing honor, martial skill, and tradition above all. Firearms, introduced by Portuguese traders in the 16th century, were initially dismissed. Many samurai scorned guns, believing the sword and bow represented true mastery. When rival clans adopted firearms, the samurai who clung to tradition faced defeat. Battles like Nagashino, 1575, demonstrated the devastating power of masked arquebusers. Only after repeated losses did Japanese warlords fully integrate firearms into strategy, but decades of rigid adherence to old methods had already reshaped the balance of power. Lesson: tradition can delay technological adoption, changing the trajectory of entire nations. Present parallel. Companies or military forces ignoring emerging technologies, AI, drones, cybersecurity, may face catastrophic disadvantages. The lesson is clear. Progress waits for no one. Future warning question: could clinging to outdated military or technological doctrine blind nations to existential threats in the coming decades? Warning 6 Zoroastrian priest class blocking reform, approximately 600 words. In ancient Persia, the Zoroastrian priesthood wielded enormous influence over both the king and the empire. Their sacred duties involved maintaining fire temples, performing elaborate ceremonies, and guiding the moral compass of the people. Yet this devotion to ritual often came at a cost. During times of crisis, rebellions, invasions, or administrative inefficiency, priests frequently resisted reform, fearing that changes would offend the gods or disrupt cosmic order. Kings who dared to bypass ritual protocols risked losing legitimacy in the eyes of their subjects, leaving the empire paralyzed at critical moments. When Alexander the Great advanced into Persia in the 4th century BCE, the empire's bureaucratic stagnation and inflexible adherence to ceremonial duties hindered effective defense. Some cities were abandoned or surrendered without resistance. While Persia's culture and rituals survived, the empire itself began to crumble under external pressures. Lesson: ritual and religious gatekeeping can stall progress, even in powerful societies. Present parallel: modern organizations, governments, and institutions sometimes resist reform to preserve hierarchy or ideology, even when innovation or adaptation is essential. Think of bureaucracies that delay disaster relief or technological upgrades. Future warning question: could rigid adherence to ideology or ritual in politics, religion, or business blind humanity to impending crises? Warning: 5 Norse settlers refusing Christianity alliances, approximately 580 words. In the remote lands of Iceland and Greenland, Norse settlers clung fiercely to their pagan beliefs. While the Christian world expanded across Europe, these communities resisted conversion and the diplomatic alliances it could have enabled. This stubbornness was not purely spiritual. Conversion often brought trade opportunities, military alliances, and cultural exchange. By rejecting these, Norse settlers isolated themselves economically and politically. When environmental pressure, like cooling climates during the Little Ice Age, intensified, isolated communities struggled to survive. Greenland settlements eventually collapsed, while Christianized Iceland continued to thrive through trade networks and adaptive governance. Lesson: cultural pride and tradition can delay essential cooperation, leading to isolation and decline. Present parallel: in today's world, nations that resist diplomacy or modern trade practices due to ideological rigidity risk economic and geopolitical marginalization. Future warning question: could stubborn cultural or ideological pride cause modern societies to face isolation, conflict, or economic collapse? Warning: 4 Khmer temple economy over farming, approximately 600 words. The Khmer Empire, at the height of its power, 9th–13th centuries, built monumental temples such as Angkor Wat and Angkor Thom. These were not just religious centers but symbols of divine authority and eternal order. Entire rivers were redirected, forests cleared, and labor conscripted, all to serve a grand architectural vision. Yet while temples soared skyward, basic agriculture and irrigation were neglected. Crops failed during droughts, famine spread, and the population suffered. Temples became monuments of devotion and power, but at the cost of practical survival. The empire eventually fragmented under environmental stress, weakened by the very devotion that had made it great. Lesson: overinvestment in symbolic or ritual projects at the expense of practical needs can doom civilizations. Present parallel: governments today sometimes pour resources into prestige projects or ideology rather than critical infrastructure, public health, or sustainability, leaving populations vulnerable. Future warning question: could obsession with ideological or symbolic projects blind humanity to ecological or societal collapse? Warning: 3 Chinese mandate rituals over economics, approximately 580 words. In imperial China, emperors ruled under the belief in the mandate of heaven, a divine sanction granting them authority to govern. Every year, elaborate rituals were performed to maintain cosmic harmony: offerings, celestial observations, and ceremonial feasts. Even during famines or economic decline, these rituals persisted. Resources were consumed to maintain appearances rather than address urgent crises. Local officials often prioritized ritual observance over practical reforms, leaving regions without food, infrastructure, or relief measures. Famines, uprisings, and economic stagnation were frequent consequences. Despite technological advances, China's rigid adherence to ritual often slowed reform. Dynasties that failed to balance tradition with adaptation lost legitimacy and control, proving that survival depends not only on divine favor but also on practical governance. Lesson: rituals may preserve authority, but ignoring economic and social realities can destabilize even the most sophisticated civilizations. Present parallel: modern bureaucracies sometimes prioritize image, protocol, or political theater over effective crisis management, echoing ancient mistakes. Future warning question: could excessive focus on appearances or ritualized governance blind modern societies to economic, environmental, or social collapse? Warning: 2 Hindu caste rigidity during invasions, approximately 600 words. During the medieval invasions of India, rigid adherence to caste hierarchy sometimes prevented practical defense strategies. In several regions, local rulers and warriors hesitated to reorganize forces or integrate talent from lower castes, fearing that breaking traditional social codes would upset cosmic or societal balance. During invasions by the Ghaznavids and later the Mughals, this inflexibility meant that armies could not fully mobilize, and administrative coordination was hampered. Cities fell not only to the invaders' strength but to the paralysis of social rigidity. Temples and rituals were maintained meticulously, but survival required flexibility, a lesson tragically ignored. Even beyond warfare, rigid social structures limited innovation and adaptation in agriculture, trade, and governance. Societies that clung too tightly to tradition became vulnerable to both external and internal pressures. Lesson: social hierarchy rigidity can cripple societal resilience. Present parallel: modern institutions, corporations, or governments can face collapse if they prioritize outdated hierarchies or rigid protocols over practical solutions. For instance, ignoring diverse expertise in crisis management can lead to preventable failures. Future warning question: Could systemic social rigidity in our interconnected world amplify crises, making societies less able to respond to climate disasters, pandemics, or political instability? Warning: 1 Easter Islanders doubling down on Moai, approximately 600 words. On a remote Pacific island, the Rapa Nui people of Easter Island undertook one of history's most enigmatic and haunting projects, the colossal Moai statues. For centuries, the construction and placement of these massive figures consumed vast amounts of timber, labor, and attention. But as forests vanished and soil eroded, food production faltered. Evidence suggests that by doubling down on monumental tradition, the islanders inadvertently accelerated ecological collapse. Starvation, social unrest, and societal fragmentation followed. The obsession with the statues became a death sentence in slow motion, a stark reminder of what happens when symbolism outweighs survival. Lesson: when symbolic tradition outweighs practical survival, collapse becomes inevitable. Present parallel. Today, human civilization faces similar risks when ideology, politics, or symbolic projects overshadow sustainability. Megaprojects, unsustainable economic policies, and climate inaction are modern echoes of the Moai tragedy. Future warning question: could humanity's obsession with status, ideology, or monuments blind us to ecological limits, triggering crises of our own making? Across time and continents, from the temples of Angkor to the forests of Easter Island, civilizations have fallen not solely because of enemies, natural disasters, or chance. They collapsed because they trusted tradition more than reality, letting ritual, pride, or dogma dictate their fate. The stories of the Aztecs, Maya, Druids, samurai, Zoroastrian priests, Norse settlers, Khmer builders, Chinese emperors, rigid caste societies, and Easter Islanders are chilling lessons. Adaptation is survival, blind devotion is death. Even today, our world echoes these mistakes. Nations, corporations, and communities sometimes ignore environmental warnings, technological change, or social inequality because tradition, pride, or ideology blinds them. The past is not merely a record of events, it is a mirror of potential futures, and a warning. If these tales of human stubbornness and ritual obsession sent chills down your spine or sparked questions about our present, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. There's more hidden history waiting to expose humanity's darkest decisions, and every story could change the way you see our world today. Remember, history doesn't just repeat, it whispers warnings. Are we listening?